Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Rowe, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were life-jacked.
What happens when a Division I athlete has to relearn how to walk after being taken hostage by cancer? My name is Dr. Rowe, and this is LifeJacked, the Resilience Podcast. LifeJacked is when an unfortunate or unplanned event happens to jack with your life. My guest for this week, Terry Tucker, will share how focusing on 4 truths has helped him persevere through his melanoma cancer diagnosis. He is a motivational speaker and the author of Sustainable Excellence, 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. He has a business administration degree from the Citadel, where he played NCAA Division I college basketball, and a master's degree from Boston University. In his professional career, Terry has been a marketing executive, a hospital administrator, a SWAT team hostage negotiator, a high school basketball coach, a business owner, a motivational speaker, and for the past 11 years, a cancer warrior. Terry has also been featured in Authority, Thrive Global, and Human Capital Leadership magazines. Hi, Terry. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
I am great, Dr. Rowe. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yes, I am definitely looking forward to this conversation. So oftentimes we hear stories from cancer survivors, but you are currently a cancer warrior. Can you share with the listeners how cancer has jacked your life?
Sure. So 2012, I'm a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas when I have a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially, I don't think much of it because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a few weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I received the call from him that we all dread. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. And so finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this rare form of melanoma. And most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun, and it affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. This has nothing to do with that. This is a rare form that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because my cancer was so rare, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And so I did. I had surgery to remove the tumor on the bottom of my foot, and I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. And when I healed, my doctor put me on a weekly injection of a drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. The side effects of the interferon were that it gave me severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection, and I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years, and that wasn't a cure. That was, as my doctor used to say, we're trying to kick the can down the road and buy you some more time. By 2017, the interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive, Fortunately, I survived that, but I had to stop the interferon. And the cancer came back almost immediately in the exact same spot on my foot where it had presented 5 years earlier. That necessitated the amputation of my left foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg in 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, an undiagnosed tumor in my ankle grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And I ended up having to have my left leg amputated above the knee, and also found out I had tumors in my lungs, which I'm currently being treated for. And I know this sounds like a very dark and ugly journey, and it certainly has been, but I'll tell you 2 things I've learned. Number 1, I don't think you know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in life. And number 2, I think cancer has made me a better human being.
Wow. I can't even believe that you have gone through all of that, Barry. Let me ask you this. First thought after hearing the diagnosis from the doctor, first thought.
I absolutely went through all the stages that I think we would associate with grief. You know, first it was literally denial. I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And then I got mad. It was like, I can't possibly have cancer. I've done everything right in my life. And my wife and I have one child, a daughter, and she was in high school at the time. So then there was sort of the bargaining with God. It's like, look, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. Because when I was diagnosed, I was told this was a death sentence. They had nothing to offer me other than surgery. And so it was like, well, okay, maybe I can turn this death sentence into a life sentence. So after the bargaining part, I certainly got down. I certainly felt sorry for myself. And then I got to a point where it was, for lack of a better term, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck. I don't like the cards I've been dealt, but I'm going to have to play these cards basically to the best of my ability. And I've been doing that now for 11 and a half years.
Well, I can see now why you are a cancer warrior, and I love that phrase, embrace the suck. So I have to ask you, what changes or shifts, right, occurred in your life as a result of the melanoma diagnosis? And no, of course, there's major shifts that have had to happen.
Yeah, they certainly have. And, I mean, I haven't worked in 11 and a half years. It has just been surviving. I remember when I mentioned I was on interferon, and that was a 5-year process. And I really felt, there was sort of a difference between living and not dying. And I was kind of in that not dying phase. I didn't feel I was contributing anything. I wasn't working. Really, my wife and daughter were taking care of me. I was so sick of being sick that I literally prayed to die. I have a very strong faith life. And I never contemplated suicide or anything like that, but I certainly asked God, I'm like, look, I'm not doing anything here. I'm not putting anything into this world, or at least I didn't feel that way. So, hey, how about taking me out of this world? And obviously that didn't happen, but I think what God did was give me the strength, the courage, the fortitude to continue to move forward every day. And if you would have asked me at that time in my life, what were your goals? I would have said, I don't have any goals. I literally was living day to day. I had to figure out how to live today, how to survive today, and I'll worry about doing the same thing tomorrow. And that was a 5-year process.
Wow. Now I want to go back a little bit. Earlier you talked about having to have your leg part amputated. And I'm a former athlete, and so you're a Division I athlete. I didn't play any type of sports in college, but love being active. And then you were on your feet as a basketball coach, and so now part of your leg is amputated. So what has life been like, and have you found ways to remain active?
Somewhat. I'm in a wheelchair. Our daughter got married almost 2 years ago, and I was able to use a prosthetic. I worked incredibly hard with a physical therapist to use a prosthetic leg to walk her down the aisle. That was my goal. And so have I remained active? Yes. And I'll give you a story. I am still being treated for tumors I have in my lungs. And I had a nurse recently ask me, what was it like to have your foot amputated in 2018 and your leg amputated in 2020? And I told her, I said, it certainly hasn't been easy. I played basketball in college. I'm 6'8" tall. So learning to walk again, falling is not an option from this height. You get hurt when you're 6'8" and you fall. So falling was not an option. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Dr. Rowe. That's who everybody who's listening to us is. And we spend a tremendous amount of time working on this vessel, this body that we have. We go to the gym, we eat right, we get enough rest, we reduce stress. And I'm certainly not saying not to do that. I think you absolutely should do that. But what I am suggesting is maybe every day, spend a little more time working on your heart, your mind, and your soul. We know this body's going to die, it's going to decay, and it's going to go away. But I honestly believe that your heart, your mind, and your soul, those things are eternal, those things live on, and I don't think we spend nearly as much time working on them as we should.
Yes, I definitely agree with you with that. And I just want to say you are an amazing father. I'm just to build up strength to be able to walk your daughter down the aisle. I mean, that is just amazing.
Thank you.
Mentioned that, yes, and you mentioned that your wife and your daughter are part of your support system. Is there anyone else that you are leaning on? And what is it like to, because typically men they're the ones providing. So now your daughter and your wife have to provide for you. So what is that like?
Yeah, it's, my wife and I kind of share things. I mean, she's the primary breadwinner in the house. We've supported each other through moves and different career changes and things like that. And my daughter, our daughter is amazing. My wife is amazing. I would definitely be dead if it wasn't for the two of them. But I'll give you another story. I just been treated at MD Anderson I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed. So I had 40 staples that went through my upper thigh, up my groin, and into my lower abdomen. And I was discharged from the hospital, and I was offered pain medication. And of course, being the idiot that I am, I don't need that. I'm tough. I can handle it. If you need pain medication, I'll tell your listeners, take the pain medication. Don't try to be a hero. So we get home, and I need to navigate 3 steps to get into the house from the garage, and then 7 steps upstairs to a landing, and then 7 more steps upstairs to get into the bedroom, to get into bed. And I made it into the house without any problem, and I made it up to 7 stairs, and my incision felt like it was on fire. I was hurting so bad. I was sweating. And I said to my wife and daughter, I said, just let me sit down. Just let me rest. Well, I'm 6'8", 240 pounds. My daughter was like, and she's in high school, absolutely not. She literally grabbed me by my T-shirt, and my wife kind of pushed from the back, and they pulled me and pushed me up the stairs to the bedroom. Now, they knew if I sat down, there was no way they were getting me up. So I always ask people, who in life is pushing or pulling you toward your goals? Or who are you pushing or pulling toward their goals? Without my daughter, without my wife, I don't know what I would have done. I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up. I was in so much pain, but they knew that they had to be there. They knew they had to support me and get me to where I needed to be. And it's a great story because they have done that for the last 11 and a half years. They have taken me to treatment. They've taken me to surgery. They've helped me get back on my quote unquote, I was going to say feet, so I'm going to make a bad joke, foot, since I don't have 2 feet anymore. But it was really them that has gotten me to where I am today. I have my brothers are still alive, but they're in Chicago. But really, it's been my wife and daughter and I. We've really kind of circled the wagons and made this happen over the last 11 and a half years.
Well, Terry, you can have metaphorical feet, so it's okay.
Absolutely.
So I have to ask you, what do you believe has helped you? I mean, I know you have your support system, you have your wife, you have your daughter that's amazing, but what do you believe has helped you stay strong as you are going through this storm?
I talk a lot about what I call my 3 Fs, and those stand for faith, family, and friends. As I mentioned, I have a very strong faith life, and as I said, it's funny, and Dr. Rowe, you may have seen this in your life as well. You see a lot of people in life that go through life and start toward a goal, and then something gets in their way, an impediment, something stops them, and they can't get over it or around it or through it, and then they give up and they quit. But we just don't quit. We've got to blame somebody now. We've got to blame our parents or our station in life or our boss. And so when I got cancer, people were like, well, who do you blame? I said, I don't blame anybody. And they would be like, well, we know you believe in God. We know you have a faith. Like, you must blame God. And I used to joke with them. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list, and said, hey, Terry Tucker, cancer today. I don't believe that at all. But as I said before, I believe he has given me the strength to go forward. And after I had my leg amputated and I had these tumors in my legs, my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And I have no medical background. I don't know how to read a CAT scan, but you can kind of look at it and say, well, gee, that sure doesn't belong there. And I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces of my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? And I can still see his face today. He kind of put his head down and sort of shaking his head no. And then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been, which said to me that God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying part. Spend more time focused on the living. The family part of it I've spoken about, but I do want to tell you a quick story. So after I finished having my leg amputated and had these tumors in my lungs, my doctor wanted to put me on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this fight. And I looked at him and I said, is it going to save my life? He said, no, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, well, if the outcome is going to be the same, I don't think I want to do this, but I'll go home and talk to my family. So I go home and start telling my wife and daughter the story. And our daughter immediately is like, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that, So we individually sit around the kitchen table and talk about how everybody feels about me having chemotherapy. And then when we're done, my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something that I don't want to do in life? But one of the jobs I've had in my life was a police officer. And I remember back when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we loved the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I took chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my wife and daughter more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. It was the bridge that got me to the drug that I'm on now. And then finally, the last one was friends. And there were people that I was 100% sure that if this ever happened to me, they would be there for me. And several of those people were like, I can't deal with this. You're a young man in your 50s and you've got this terminal illness. I can't deal with it. And they kind of backed away. And then there were people who I never thought would be there for me that have never left my side in the last 11 and a half years. So faith, family, and friends have really gotten me to the point where I am today.
Wow, faith, family, and friends. Yes, hopefully all of us have at least 1 or 2 of those, if not all 3. Now, you mentioned
Absolutely.
that you mentioned you were a police officer, and so I know in our preliminary talks and getting to know you mentioned that you were a hostage negotiator. So how did you become a hostage negotiator, and what was that experience?
Yeah, usually your next door neighbor is not a hostage negotiator. So
right.
So I've always wanted to be, whatever I did, I always tried to be the best, and I wanted to be associated with the best. And so the SWAT team had an opening for a hostage negotiator. And it's a group, and for those of your audience who don't understand how how a SWAT team is usually configured. There's usually a tactical team, which are the men and women that kind of have all the toys, and then there are the negotiators. And we used to joke with the tactical folks that if we did our job right, they didn't get to use all their toys and things like that. So basically there was an opening, and I put in for it. There was a physical fitness test, runs, push-ups, sit-ups. There was a meeting with a psychologist. We had a psychologist associated or attached to our team. And then there was meeting with the command staff and the negotiators. And it was an all or nothing. If everybody voted, thumbs up, then you got on the team. If one person said, I don't really like Terry, or I can't work with him, then you didn't make the team. And so I went through that entire process and was fortunate enough to be selected to be on the Cincinnati Police Department SWAT team as a hostage negotiator. And we were very lucky. We got to train with the FBI's hostage negotiation team and things like that. So it was a great group of people, and I learned a tremendous amount from doing that job.
Wow. Well, hey, I definitely believe if you have a chance to do something once in a lifetime, as they say, YOLO, you only live once. So that's
right. You're absolutely right.
So do you see any parallels between being taken hostage by cancer and your life as a hostage negotiator?
That's a great question. And I don't look at myself as having been taken hostage by cancer. I look at it more as it's really solidified what's important in my life. I think there's a tendency today to think that we are born empty. And that when we get into life, when we get out of school, whatever that is, high school, college, grad school, whatever that ends up being, that we then are responsible for, quote unquote, filling ourselves up. We've got to get that good education. We've got to get a good job, make a lot of money, drive a nice car, live in a nice house, have a great family, and things like that. And Dr. Rowe, what I've come to understand is it's not we're born empty. We're born full. We're born with everything we need to be successful in life already inside of us. We just need to find where that is and pull it out and use it to our benefit. So what I've kind of come to understand is that life should not be about what you get. It should be about what you give. And so your life should be more about pouring yourself out with your unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of yourself, but also for the betterment of your family, of your friends, of your community, of your country. And I think if we looked at it a little bit more like that, because I've seen so many people that, I've got to have the latest iPhone, or I've got to drive the nicest car, or I've got to make the most money. None of that stuff matters, because at the end of your life, you're going to be in that plot of dirt right next to the person who was homeless or who was poor. What matters is what we give. And all of us know about Fred McFeely Rogers, otherwise known as Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And he educated so many people, including myself, on public television. And I remember hearing the story that when Mr. Rogers died back in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. Our lives should be about helping other people, making other people's lives better. If you hoard all this stuff, you'll be miserable. If you pour yourself out in the service of others, I guarantee you will have an amazing life.
Oh, my goodness. I can't agree with you more. And yes, Mr. Rogers was definitely an American gem. I, too, was a fan of Mr. Rogers when I was younger. I glued the little blue headlight tissues just like he did.
That's right. Exactly.
Yes, for sure. And I love what you said, that we are not born empty. We are born full. I love that. I guess you keep saying all these really profound things, and I think I can see why you're a motivational speaker, but that's just my opinion. But how did you become a motivational speaker?
People were making the suggestion. They were like, you need to tell your story. And I I have always been an incredibly private individual. And so sharing myself, opening up, being authentic, those are, I've always been authentic, but I've never been a sharer, for lack of a better term. I've never wanted to share things, but people are like, look, you've been through all this. You need to share it. And I'm like, I don't need to share it. I don't have all the answers. I don't feel I have all the answers. Like, it doesn't matter if you have all the answers. There'll be somebody out there that it will resonate with. So you should go out there and do that. And I think there's an old joke that says when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God has never talked to me. I don't want anybody to think that is the case. But I think what God does is put people in our path. And when enough people kind of get in your path and start making the same suggestion, you should write a book, you should start a speaking tour, or whatever, a motivational speaking business. I think I'm smart enough to kind of buck up and say, I need to pay attention to this. This might be important. So I made the brilliant business decision. Nobody take business advice from me. I made the brilliant business decision to start this motivational speaking business as COVID hit. And like so many other businesses, I had to figure out a way to deliver my service, to deliver my product in a different way. And somebody had reached out to me and said, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? I had no idea what a podcast was. And like, well, we kind of have a conversation and then we put it on social media. And I said, oh, okay, I'm willing to try. And I honestly, Dr. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. And the person would ask me a question and I would kind of lean in and read the Post-it notes. I was terrible. I was absolutely, positively horrible when I first started. But for everybody who's listening to us, think about the first time you drove a car, or you made a meal, or you studied something you didn't understand. Were you any good at it? Probably not. None of us are. You have to learn. You have to get better. And I remember I was talking to my publisher, and I said, Scott, I listened to every podcast I've ever been on. I said, because I want to get better. I want to see how many times I said or huh, or do I have better stories, or can I illustrate a point with a better story? And he was like, no, Terry, it's not about being good. It's just about not sucking. And I said, well, thanks for the title of my next book, Just Don't Suck. But what I ended up saying was like, no, I want to be good at this. I want to make sure that the host feels that whether it was an hour or a half hour, whatever time they spent with me, that their audience was going to get something positive out of it. And I'll end with this story. I did a podcast with a man who had been an NFL, National Football League player, played for the Titans and the Steelers. And this guy's like 6'6", like 310 pounds. His brother is actually in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. And I remember we were talking after the podcast, and he said, Terry, when I started my podcast, I didn't think anybody would listen to me. And I said, Marcus, how could you feel that way? You've made it to the pinnacle of professional sports. You've made it to the top of your field. How could you think nobody would think you had something to contribute or something to say? And he said, Terry, I just didn't feel that I would be any good at this. So I think all of us, regardless of how important, influential, what kind of jobs we have or something, like we all sometimes think that I don't have anything here. There's nothing to contribute. I can promise you, no matter what you do for a living, no matter what your life experience, you have a story that somebody else could benefit from.
Oh my goodness. That is just fabulous to hear that. Your journey has really been amazing. What's next, Terry? What's next?
Yes, that's a great question. So I ended up writing a book called Sustainable Excellence, and it's a book about success. And I think I'd like to write another book about another word that begins with S, and that's significance. Success is what we do for ourselves, and significance is what we do to help other people, to make a difference in other people's lives. Don't get me wrong, I think you can be both. I think you can be successful and significant, but I think what's next is to write a book about significance, about how people can help other people and make a positive difference in their lives.
I love it. Well, I look forward to being able to get a copy of this next book that you're going to write.
Thank you.
So in your opinion, what are the best ways to build resilience?
I've seen a lot of people in these past 11 and a half years that just get down, get depressed, that think they've got nothing to contribute, nothing to live for because they have cancer or diabetes or heart disease or whatever it ends up being. And I just don't think that's necessarily the case. I think we all have a breaking point. I think we all have a place somewhere down the road where we just can't go on. We just can't do anything more. Back in the 1950s, this is a true story. Back in the 1950s, there was a professor at Johns Hopkins University who did an experiment with rats. And he took rats and he put them in a tank of water that was over their head. And he wanted to see how long the average rat could tread water. And the average rat treaded water for about 15 minutes. And just as those rats were getting ready to sink and drown, he reached in, grabbed them, pulled them out, dried them off, and let them rest for a while. And then he took those exact same rats and put them back in that exact same tank of water. And the second time around, on average, those rats treaded water for 60 hours. Now think about that. The first time, 15 minutes. I'm just not going to lose my business or fail a test. I'm going to die. My life is going to be over. And the second time around, 60 hours, which said to me two things. Number one, the importance of hope in our lives, that we have to believe that if we know we're doing the right thing, maybe not today, maybe not this month, maybe not even this year, but if we keep doing the things we know are good for us, eventually we will get to the point in our life where we will feel successful, however you define that. And the second thing it taught me was just how much more our physical bodies can handle than we ever thought they could. We give up. We throw in the towel. We don't think we can go on long before our physical bodies actually shut down. And I have a good friend of mine, actually a young man who works with my wife, who was a former Navy SEAL. And the SEALs talk about what they call their 40% rule, which basically says if you're done, if you're at the end of your rope, if you can't go on, you're only at 40% of your maximum. And you still have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself. So the next time you don't think you can get off the couch and go to the gym, the next time you don't think you can study for that test, the next time you don't think you can stay late at the office and make that call that might get you that sale, realize you have another 60% left in reserve to give to yourself.
I love that. I think that I tapped into that bit more 40% trying to get through my doctoral program.
I'm sure you did, yes.
Well, Terry, thank you so much for your time and sharing, your wisdom and your journey with my listeners. I really appreciate you. Can you do me a favor? Can you take the time to let everyone know how they can purchase a copy of your book or contact you to speak to their audience?
Sure. The Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life, it's basically available anywhere you can get a book online. Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Apple iBooks. It's available in a Kindle version and a hard copy and a soft cover version. And to reach out to me, to leave me a message, to consider me for a speaking opportunity, I have a blog called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day, and on Mondays I put up the Monday morning motivational message. My social media links are there. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. That's all at motivationalcheck.com.
Do you have any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, use your unique gifts and talents, and live that reason. Because if you do, at the end of your life, I'm going to promise you two things. Number one, you're going to be a whole lot happier. And number two, you're going to have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Thank you so much for being a guest, Terry. And I wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. And I look forward to hearing your cancer is possibly in remission or even gone. You never know. Anything's possible, right?
Absolutely. Miracles happen every day.
Yes, it sure does. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being a guest. Take care.
Thank you for having me on.
Hey, are you really loving this podcast, or did you really enjoy this week's episode? Then please subscribe, like, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Remember to live, love, laugh, learn, and then repeat. See you in the next episode.